My sister always played the role of a little angel until she snatched my idea right from under my nose and turned it into her golden ticket. Now she's the queen. My parents adore her, and I've become invisible. But you know what? Every crown has its thorns, and I just sharpened one of them. Let's see how long she can stay on the throne. My name is Dan, I'm 25, and here's a fact. Life can be brutal, especially when you have a younger sister who's everyone's golden child. Everyone's except yours. Linda has always been the golden girl in the eyes of our parents. She could pull off any stunt, and all she'd get in return were approving smiles and applause. Example? One time, she left the faucet running, and our kitchen turned into a mini waterfall. What did our parents say? Well, she's learning how to manage a household. If it had been me, yeah, I'd probably have to mop up the floor myself and sit through a lecture on adult responsibility. But it wasn't just these little things. Linda was their favorite in everything. Whenever she needed something, our parents would immediately jump in to help. And me? I was the backup option. Mom always told me I should try to be more like Linda. But you know what? I didn't want to be like Linda. I had my own plans. When I turned 18, I started seriously thinking about building my own business. I've always had a knack for numbers, and I realized the world needed a financial planning app that could really help people manage their money. I already had a rough draft of the project and a few cool ideas I wanted to implement to shake up the entire industry. I was convinced that this was my chance to finally step out of Linda's shadow and show everyone what I was capable of. You know that feeling when you're so pumped that you feel like you can conquer the world? That was me. Then one day, I happened to walk past the living room where Linda was chatting with our parents. I wasn't planning to eavesdrop, but something caught my attention. And suddenly, it hit me like a lightning bolt. She was discussing my project. Yeah, you heard me right. My project. The brilliant idea I had spent months working on was now hers. I listened more carefully as she described the financial planning app, throwing around buzzwords like innovations and unique features, as if they were her own ideas. Of course, my parents were thrilled. Dad was already offering to help her find investors, and Mom said something like, "You're such a smart girl, Linda. We always knew you were special." Special? She had just stolen my idea and spun it to make it sound like her own genius creation. That's how it works, apparently. And yeah, the worst part wasn't that she stole my idea. It was that my parents were ecstatic about it. Not only did they fund her startup, but they also admired her every move. And what did they say to me? Nothing. In their world, I didn't even exist. Not when it came to support, at least. Their attention was entirely on Linda and her brilliant idea. At that moment, I was boiling inside. Watching Linda get everything I had worked so hard for was unbearable. I knew I had to do something. But what exactly? Linda skyrocketed to success, like a rocket bound for Mars, and the whole family instantly became her fan club. Dad started calling her our little Steve Jobs, and Mom couldn't stop bragging about how Linda had built everything from scratch. Seriously? From scratch? She stole my idea, and now she's getting all the applause while I'm stuck on the sidelines watching this circus unfold. My parents even started showing her off to all our relatives. "Dan, aren't you proud of your sister?" Mom would ask. "Of course I am," I'd say with a forced smile, but inside I was burning with rage. Honestly, I wanted to punch the wall every time I heard her name. She became the queen of our family's little castle. Everyone adored her, admired her, and practically worshipped the ground she walked on. Even family dinners turned into Linda's one-woman show. Her new project, her achievements, her life, everything revolved around her. I, on the other hand, was more like a piece of furniture, something that's just there, unnoticed. "Dan, pass the salt," was about as much attention as I ever got. But it wasn't just the resentment that got to me. The more I observed her company, the more I realized that her so-called empire was nothing more than a house of cards. Sure, she had money, connections, and of course our parents' support. But she had no idea how to actually run a business. She was just riding the wave as long as the money kept flowing. Her spending was growing faster than Instagram likes, and her decisions were as random as a roulette wheel. It became clear to me that it was only a matter of time before everything fell apart. But waiting? That's not my style. I decided to speed things up. You know what they say? If you want something done right, do it yourself. And who better than me to know all of Linda's weak spots? I knew her long before she became this fake, successful businesswoman. I remembered her laziness, her habit of procrastinating, and her inability to manage money. I knew every little flaw and every misstep she'd ever made. Who better than me to use all of that against her? I started by planting someone on the inside. Well, planting is a bit of an exaggeration. It was a former classmate who didn't mind earning a little cash by leaking information. He got a job at Linda's company, and every bit of intel he fed me only confirmed what I had already suspected. Her business was a complete mess. The finances didn't add up, reports were fake, and the staff? A bunch of random people who would jump ship the moment they got a better offer. And that's when I realized all I needed to do was give her a little nudge toward the edge. A small leak here, a couple of bad decisions there, and the whole thing would come crashing down. They say that if you want to sink a ship, you have to know where to punch the hole. I wasn't about to launch a full frontal attack. First, I needed to fully understand the inner workings of her business empire and find out exactly where the rot was. I reached out to an old acquaintance who was more than willing to help, for a modest price, of course. Whisper a few words about free parties and a bottle of rum, and he was mine for life. He joined Linda's team and started feeding me information. And here's what I found out. Linda's company was nothing more than a beautifully wrapped disaster. On the surface, everything looked perfect. The website, the ads, glossy reports, even some interviews with local media. But in reality, it was like those people who post photos of themselves flying business class, but you run into them sitting in economy. Her expenses were through the roof. Seriously, every month she was spending like she was preparing her startup to impress Mark Zuckerberg himself. She blew so much money on coffee breaks for her team that she could have opened a cafe. And the corporate merch? They splurged on it like they were sponsoring the Olympics. And the best part? Most of the staff didn't even wear those branded caps and t-shirts. And her revenue? A complete joke. The glossy reports were so overhyped it was absurd. In reality, they were selling their services for peanuts just to stay afloat. Every month, the company was hemorrhaging money like a leaky bucket. Instead of rethinking her strategy, Linda just kept increasing her spending. Full speed ahead, as long as people love us, seemed to be her motto. As if customer admiration would magically erase the red ink from her balance sheets. Honestly, I was stunned by her recklessness. She lived by the philosophy, if you're in financial trouble, just spend more. It was like trying to put out a fire by tossing in more wood. Where her brain went, I had no idea. Probably lost somewhere between yet another overpriced ad campaign and the rent for her fancy downtown office. That's when I realized this was my chance. The house of cards was already teetering, and all I had to do was give it a little push. Listen, if you think revenge is just sitting back and waiting for everything to collapse on its own, you're dead wrong. I stayed up nights, picking apart her business like some cyberpunk hacker. Linda probably thought that as long as she was in the spotlight, nothing could touch her. But she forgot one crucial thing. I knew her better than she knew herself. If you strike at the right time and in the right place, the whole cardboard castle crumbles in an instant. One night, sitting at my laptop at 3 a.m., I found the jackpot. Emails. Not just any emails, but her personal correspondence with investors. Oh, it was a masterpiece. I discovered that all her successful deals and steady growth were one big lie. The emails revealed investors demanding reports and threatening to pull out of their agreements. She was practically begging them for just one more chance, like a student pleading with the professor moments before a final exam. We see positive trends. Just a couple more months and everything will stabilize. It read like she was promising a drowning man that a boat would arrive soon. I leaked all these emails to her key partners and suppliers, tossing in a few friendly tips about how her company was sinking faster than the Titanic. And guess what? The dominoes started to fall. Partners began pulling out of contracts, and suppliers cut off their services. It was as satisfying as watching a row of dominoes tumble. One push, and everything fell apart. First, the supply chain dried up. Employees panicked. "Hey, where's our coffee for lunch?" "Oh, sorry, no budget for caffeine, but we do have a mountain of debt." Panic spread through the office like a virus. Some people started job hunting immediately. Others just ran off like rats fleeing a sinking ship. And the funniest part? Linda kept trying to convince everyone that it was just a temporary setback. Yeah, right. It was like watching the captain of the Titanic tell passengers they were merely dipping their toes in the ocean. Her pride evaporated. Her confidence shattered into 1,000 pieces like a glass hitting the floor at a wedding. Her empire crumbled right before her eyes. And that was only the beginning of the show. Linda's company was falling apart faster than sandcastles at high tide. Investors were backing out, suppliers were closing up shop, and employees were scattering like they'd seen the ship catch fire. Linda raced around the office in a blind panic, giving pointless orders. Honestly, it was kind of hilarious to watch. If it had been a reality TV show, it would have gotten record-breaking views. Imagine the CEO in tears, unable to stop the disaster, while her employees deleted her number from their phones. "We're all in this together, right?" "Yeah, sure, until the money dries up." As soon as the problems started piling up, those loyal employees vanished faster than friends you owe money to. One by one, resignation letters rolled in. "Sorry, boss, found a better opportunity." Which in reality meant they'd rather sit on their couch binge-watching Netflix than stick around to clean up her mess. Investors who had been patting her on the back just days before now demanded their money back. Suppliers who once bent over backward to deliver goods late at night suddenly had a change of priorities. It was glorious. Every new email about a broken contract brought me a sense of almost physical pleasure. I mean, I'm not a villain, but let's just say watching her paper empire collapse was like having a front row seat at your favorite band's concert. But I didn't just want to ruin her business. No, I wanted to do it with style. What's revenge without an audience? Not my kind of thing. I wanted our parents to see the entire disaster unfold from beginning to end. Let them realize their little princess wasn't as brilliant as they thought. I even timed everything perfectly to coincide with a family dinner. You know, one of those cozy evenings where everyone pretends they have perfect relationships. Linda showed up dressed like a queen, trying to convince everyone she had everything under control. But her eyes gave her away, full of chaos and fear. Fake it till you make it? Yeah, well, she was definitely still stuck at the fake it part. Picture this. She's sitting at the dinner table, smiling awkwardly, while her phone is blowing up with notifications about terminated contracts. At first, our parents didn't notice, but soon enough, they caught on to her stressed expression and started asking questions. I played it cool, poking at my mashed potatoes like I couldn't care less. But inside, I was savoring every second. It was like watching a skyscraper collapse in slow motion, majestic and spectacular. Dad, still clueless, asked, "Is something wrong, Linda?" And that's when she cracked. She started fumbling for excuses, stammering about temporary setbacks and how everything will be fine. Mom tried to comfort her, but it was pathetic. I just sat there, pretending to be indifferent, but inside I was reveling in it. For once, everything was working out perfectly. For me. The best part? I could see it in my parents' faces. The slow, dawning realization that their golden child wasn't so perfect after all. It was like watching someone realize they'd spent a fortune on a fake Rolex. That evening was set to be pure fire. Our parents had invited us to one of their usual family dinners. White tablecloths, candles, and a fancy cheese platter, as if they were hosting the Queen of England. In reality, it was just another excuse to brag about Linda and her so-called successes. Well, I figured this was the perfect moment to lay all my cards on the table. If you're going to put on a show, do it with flair. I walked in, acting calm, like nothing was going on. I spotted Linda, dressed to impress, glowing like a Christmas tree, but with bags under her eyes. She was barely holding it together. Relax, sis, I thought, smirking to myself. It's about to get worse. We sat down, and everything played out according to the usual script. Mom asked Linda about her business, and Dad chimed in with his usual, "We have such a talented daughter." I patiently waited, poking at my food, pretending to care. Linda rambled on about new opportunities and ongoing negotiations with investors. But I knew it was all smoke and mirrors. And then, my moment came. I pulled a folder from my bag, placed it on the table, and said, "You guys might want to take a look at this." "What's that, Dan?" Mom asked, puzzled. I spread out the documents, reports, emails, terminated contracts, and messages from investors that made it sound like they'd rather burn her office down than wait another day for their money. "This is proof that your golden girl ran her company straight into the ground." Mom's face went pale as she frantically tried to make sense of it. "There must be some mistake. Linda would never let this happen." Linda, grasping at straws, muttered, "It's just a rough patch. I'll fix it. Everything's under control." But her voice wavered, like a student trying to bluff their way through a test they didn't study for. And that's when I finally allowed myself to enjoy the moment. For the first time in her life, she had lost control, and I was the one who had made it happen. Dad exhaled sharply, flipping through the pages. Mom kept mumbling about misunderstandings. Linda bounced from one excuse to another, but the more she spoke, the more ridiculous she sounded. "It's just a minor setback, okay? Every startup faces challenges." I grinned and replied, "Sure, Linda, and every sinking ship just needs a bit of duct tape, right?" Mom still couldn't believe her perfect daughter had screwed up this badly. Dad was starting to see the truth, though he tried to stay neutral as always. He turned to Linda and finally asked, "Linda, is this true? Is it really as bad as Dan says?" And that's when the real drama began. Linda broke down. Her face turned red, and tears started streaming down her cheeks. "I just wanted you to be proud of me. I didn't mean for it to end like this." Mom rushed to console her, but it was too late. I sat back, savoring every second. At last, they saw her for what she really was. Not a genius, but a fraud who couldn't keep her business afloat. "So," I said with a sly grin, "maybe now you guys can finally be proud of me. After all, who else could pull off an exposé this good?" Linda glared at me with pure hatred, as if her stare could set me on fire. But you know what? I didn't care. I'd won. This was it. The final act. I knew that for my blow to be fatal, I needed to strike at just the right moment, with maximum precision. Linda was drowning in problems, desperately clinging to her last lifeline. A major investor. The kind of guy who could have thrown her a lifebuoy if he'd known about her troubles a little sooner. But guess who got to him first? That's right. It was me. I planned everything down to the finest detail. No direct calls. Oh no, that would have been too crude. First, I studied the investor as if I were writing his biography. I learned his tastes, his business priorities, and even his favorite whiskey. Every piece of intel, all to make sure our conversation would go down perfectly. When I finally made contact with him, it was a masterpiece of diplomacy. "Hey, Tom, you know how I've always been a fan of innovation?" I opened with a friendly tone. "Well, I've got something special, and trust me, it's miles ahead of anything Linda's shown you." Tom wasn't a fool. He was intrigued immediately, because, like any smart investor, he was more interested in rockets blasting off than in sinking ships. And I sold him my app idea so brilliantly that he couldn't resist. I pitched it as not just a rescue mission, but a breakthrough worth every penny. Every word in my pitch sparkled like a diamond, and it sounded like I was offering him a front-row ticket to the future. While Linda was busy trying to patch holes in her crumbling business, I sealed the deal with her last hope. Not only did Tom refuse to help her, he invested in my project. That was the game changer. It was as if I had snatched the only life raft from her in the middle of the ocean, leaving her to sink. "Life isn't fair, Linz. You should have known better," I thought as I received confirmation of the investment. The number in my bank account looked so sweet that I almost wanted to screenshot it and use it as wallpaper for my bedroom. This was my moment. I had taken what was rightfully mine. And Linda? She was left with nothing. That same day, I imagined how she'd react to the news. She was probably sitting in her office, staring blankly at the wall, realizing it was all over. All her dreams, all her hopes, shattered. And me? I savored the moment like I just won an Oscar for Best Performance. Our parents sat at the table with faces as if they had just discovered their entire wine collection had gone bad. Their golden girl had officially lost her shine, turning from gold to bronze, or even rust. The business had collapsed, the support had evaporated, and the money? Well, the money was gone faster than guests at a bad party. And the sweetest part? They finally saw reality. They finally realized which one of us had actually done something worthwhile. Dad silently flipped through the documents like a judge sentencing Linda to a lifetime of disappointment. Mom, usually the first to sing Linda's praises, sat there in stunned silence. It was the moment she realized their little star hadn't just dimmed. It had burned out and scattered into dust. Linda sat with her head down, as if hoping she could dissolve into thin air. I thought I'd hear some kind of excuse from her, but she stayed silent. And honestly, that silence was the most satisfying part. It was as if karma had finally settled its score, delivering me exactly what I deserved. Mom made a weak attempt to comfort her. Linda, sweetheart, everyone goes through tough times. Seriously? I nearly burst out laughing. Tough times? She didn't just forget to turn off the stove, Mom. She lost an entire company and a fortune. Then Dad, clearly disappointed but trying to salvage the situation, muttered, Well, at least we still have Dan. That's right, Dad, I replied, unable to resist a smirk. Here I am, the backup player who carried the game in the final minutes. I sliced into my steak with relish, savoring it like it was the taste of revenge. And let me tell you, it was the best steak I'd ever had. Finally, Linda spoke, her voice small and trembling, as if every word was a struggle. I just wanted you to be proud of me. I chuckled softly. Well, Linda, it looks like you chose the wrong strategy. That was the end of her story, and the beginning of mine. Linda lost everything, our parents' support, the money, and her reputation. And me? I got everything that should have been mine all along. But here's the funny thing. Instead of pure triumph, I felt a hint of bitterness. Revenge, as it turns out, isn't as sweet as you'd expect. Sure, I won. I got what I wanted and proved I didn't need their fake fan club. But inside, there was an emptiness. It's like winning a fight only to realize you've still got bruises when it's over. We finished dinner, and I got ready to leave. As I glanced back at Linda, I realized she was no longer a threat. She looked like someone who had lost everything and didn't know where to start again. There was no anger or arrogance left in her, just exhaustion. And you know what? I actually felt sorry for her. Yeah, pity. The strangest feeling, one I never expected to have. But that's the paradox. I won, but I didn't feel like a winner. Well, Mom, Dad, I said on my way out, maybe next time you'll pick the right kid to invest in. I walked out of the house, feeling a mix of relief and bitterness. Revenge was complete, but life moved on.